Every time you let that tiny disrespect slide, you lose ground you'll never get back. Machiavelli called it the first crack in a wall that eventually caves. When you nod at an insult disguised as a joke, when you explain yourself to someone who isn't listening, when you say no worries while choking on the words, they see it. And they remember. You think you're being mature. You think you're being composed. But to them, it's confirmation. You're someone they can laugh at, dismiss, interrupt, and overlook. Not because you're weak, but because you behave like someone who won't fight for his image. And in Machiavelli's world, image is everything. He warned of it 500 years ago, that humiliation doesn't start with catastrophe. It begins in silence, in micro-decisions, in the invisible mistakes that chip away at your presence until there's nothing left to protect. And these mistakes, they're common. You've made them. You're probably making one right now. There are seven behaviors that seem polite, reasonable, even honorable. But each one destroys your dignity in a different way. People won't tell you you're doing them. They'll just treat you accordingly. And by the time you notice, the damage will already be done. The real question is, which of the 7 are you guilty of? Let's begin with the first. Mistake 1. You try to be liked more than you try to be respected. It doesn't feel like failure. It feels like decency. You keep the peace. You lower your voice. You let things go. You pride yourself on being the bigger person. But what you see as strength, others read as softness. They don't tell you this. They just stop seeing you as someone who needs to be taken seriously. Machiavelli warned that being loved is never enough. It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one must choose, he wrote. Not as cruelty, but as strategy, because fear creates hesitation. And hesitation protects your position. What does this mean for you? It means that every time you bite your tongue, instead of drawing a line, you teach them how far they can go. You teach them that your approval is free, and that you will do anything to keep their affection, and what is freely given is quietly despised. Respect is not born from kindness, it's born from boundaries, from the unshakable clarity that you will not tolerate disrespect, even if it makes others uncomfortable. You think they'll appreciate your softness, but they won't. They'll use it, and then they'll discard you, not because you were wrong, but because you were forgettable. Mistake 2. You make yourself too available. You're always there. You answer the first call. You respond instantly to every message. You never leave anyone waiting. And deep down, you think this shows loyalty, that people will see your consistency and reward it with the same. They won't. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He said, "Men are ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, and covetous." That's not cynicism, that's clarity. When you're always available, people don't feel lucky to have you. They feel entitled to you. The first time you say no, it won't be met with respect. It will be met with resentment, because you didn't teach them to appreciate your presence. You taught them to expect it. Every powerful figure in history understood this rule. If you want to be respected, you must control access to yourself. Not just physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. If you're too easy to reach, they will reach for you only when they need something, never when it counts. You were told that availability is a virtue, but in the eyes of power, it's a trap. You become the fallback, the afterthought, the tool they dust off when convenient and drop when they're done. You want to be respected. Vanish more often. Let them miss you. Let them wonder. Mistake 3. You over-explain. This one is almost invisible, but it leaks your power faster than any other. You say too much. You justify decisions no one questioned. You try to clear the air when the room is already against you. Why? Because deep down, you believe if people just understood your intentions, they'd treat you better. But Machiavelli would tell you, they don't care about your intentions, they care about your position. The vulgar are always taken by appearances, he wrote. Not what is real, what seems real. And here's what over-explaining seems like. Guilt. Every extra sentence, every nervous clarification, every attempt to be perfectly understood reads as self-doubt. Even when you're right, even when you're sincere, it paints you as insecure, as someone who needs to be forgiven for having a spine, and people don't respect that. They exploit it. Understand this. The more you talk, the more ammunition you give. The more you reveal, the easier you are to attack. When you flood a room with justifications, you think you're defending yourself, but you're actually handing them the knife. Machiavelli believed in mystery, restraint, minimalism in speech. Because when you say less, your words weigh more, and the silence you leave behind is more terrifying than any argument you could make. You think you're being honest. What they see is someone who talks too much because he's afraid of being misunderstood. And in their minds, that means you can be pushed. You can be questioned. You can be played. Stop trying to explain everything. Sometimes power is not in being understood. It's in being undeniable. Pause now. Don't rush past what you've just heard. These aren't personality quirks. They are strategic faults. And worse, they are humiliations you may not even realize you're committing. Machiavelli never warned about war the way others did. He warned about the smiles before the strike, the laughter after the meeting, the friendly handshakes that precede betrayal, because that's when you lose, not with a blow, but with a nod. You think you're being good, but to them you've already lost. And these first 3 mistakes, they're just the surface. The next ones go deeper, into how you respond to disrespect, how you try to recover when you've been dismissed, and how, without meaning to, you turn yourself into someone they laugh at and never tell you why. You already know how the descent begins. When you try too hard to be liked, make yourself too available, or say too much in the name of being understood. But the real humiliation comes later. It comes when you're tested, when someone crosses a line and your response, or lack of one, tells them everything they need to know. These next mistakes are not just habits. They are public announcements of your disposability. You won't know you've made them until it's too late. But Machiavelli saw them from a mile away, so let's go there. Mistake 4. You tolerate subtle disrespect. You don't scream. You don't cause a scene. You stay mature. But that moment when someone interrupts you mid-sentence and you let it slide, that time they made a joke at your expense and you laughed along. That conversation where your ideas were ignored and you kept quiet. They saw it. Everyone did. And more importantly, they felt it. Machiavelli understood power as theater. Men in general judge more by the eyes than by the hands, he wrote. Meaning, it doesn't matter what you think. It only matters what they see. And when they see you tolerate disrespect, even once, they understand who you are, someone whose pride can be touched without consequence. You tell yourself you're being strategic. That silence is grace. But in their eyes, it's submission, and submission invites escalation. People don't stop at the first boundary, they stop at the first punishment. If none comes, they push again, harder. You don't need to explode, you don't need to shout, but you do need to correct. Not later, not in private, in real time. A glance, a pause, a cold withdrawal, something, anything that says, I saw that, don't do it again, because if you don't draw the line, you've already erased it. Mistake 5, you try to win with logic when someone's already made up their mind. You know the moment. Someone accuses you unfairly, misinterprets your actions, belittles you in public, and you try to stay composed. You respond with reason, evidence, politeness. You build your case like a lawyer, thinking you'll be vindicated. But Machiavelli would laugh. He knew that public perception isn't about truth. It's about dominance. The vulgar are always taken by appearances, he wrote. And when you respond to accusation with logic, it doesn't look like strength. It looks like begging. And nothing makes people lose respect for you faster than watching you beg to be seen correctly. You're not changing their mind. You're performing for an audience that already decided who the alpha is. And in that moment, it's not you. When you explain yourself to someone who's already disrespected you, you shift the frame from accusation to trial. And that's the humiliating part, because trials are for the weak. The powerful don't explain. They withdraw, they retaliate, they reposition. If someone distorts your actions in front of others, your job is not to prove your innocence. Your job is to make them regret targeting you, and that doesn't happen with speeches. Mistake 6. You try to recover your image through niceness. You feel the shame. You know they've looked down on you, so you double down on kindness. You become more agreeable, more helpful. You give them another chance to see how good you are. Machiavelli would call this the most fatal mistake of all, because once you've been seen as low status, friendliness does not elevate you. It confirms their judgment. You become the court jester, the pleaser, the guy who took the hit and came back smiling. You think you're showing character. What they see is someone desperate to repair their reputation, someone who lacks the spine to reclaim it. And once you try to fix your image with sweetness, it's over. Because you've accepted the frame. You've internalized the insult. You're not fighting to restore your power. You're fighting to be liked again. Machiavelli understood that when your image is damaged, you don't respond with softness. You respond with silence, scarcity, unpredictability. You make them uncomfortable. You make them wonder. That's how you return. Not through apology, through elevation. You don't re-enter the room with a joke. You re-enter the room with power. So what does all of this add up to? Imagine a version of you that's already made these 3 mistakes and didn't realize it. You let a few jokes slide. You reasoned with someone who disrespected you. You came back smiling, trying to make things normal again. It felt like maturity, like emotional intelligence. But now you see it clearly. It was a pattern of humiliation, one small concession at a time, and everyone around you knew it before you did. That's what makes it dangerous. Because you're not losing to monsters. You're losing to people who are playing a different game. One Machiavelli mapped centuries ago. And the scariest part? They don't need to beat you. They just need you to beat yourself. We've now seen 6 of the 7, and if you're still watching, it means you already know what's coming. The final mistake is the most tragic of all. Not because it hurts the most, but because it hides inside your best qualities. It's the one you cling to even when the others fall away. The one that feels like your last defense, but is actually your last delusion. You've seen the first 6. How people test your boundaries, how they read your over-explaining as weakness, how they sense your need to be liked and turn it against you. But the 7th mistake, that one's different. Because it doesn't look like weakness. It looks like strength. It disguises itself as morality, as integrity, as being a good person. And that's exactly why it humiliates you. Mistake 7. You believe your goodness will protect you. You tell yourself that if you just stay kind, honest, loyal, the world will recognize your value. That one day, the people who used you will apologize. The ones who disrespected you will finally see your worth. Machiavelli would call this thinking suicidal, not because goodness is wrong, but because goodness without power is bait. The promise given was a necessity of the past, he wrote. The word broken is a necessity of the present. In other words, people do what they must to serve themselves, not what you hope they'll do to honor you. You hold the belief that your virtue has weight, that it commands protection. But here's the truth. Goodness is invisible unless it's paired with leverage. Unless it's paired with fear. You don't have to be cruel, but you must stop being predictable. You must stop using decency as a shield against a world that doesn't care. Because when you walk into a room expecting others to respect your heart, you will leave that room in pieces. They'll smile. They'll thank you. and they'll never think of you again. Here's how it happens. You forgive too quickly. You give second chances to people who humiliated you. You explain your motives to those who were never listening. You play fair in a world that plays with loaded dice. And the more pure your intentions are, the more blind you become to the fact that intentions don't matter, outcomes do. You confuse your self-worth with how much pain you can absorb without reacting. You confuse humility with silence. You confuse emotional discipline with self-erasure. Machiavelli didn't want you to be evil. He wanted you to stop being naive. Because a good man who can't defend his image will be destroyed by lesser men who can. The world doesn't laugh at monsters. It laughs at the good man who still believes his decency will save him. So how do you stop this? You rewire the way you measure yourself. You stop asking if they liked you. You start asking if they hesitated before crossing you. You stop using morality as a currency and start using presence as a shield. You stop assuming people are like you and start assuming they're watching you for weakness, because they are. The question now isn't whether you've made these 7 mistakes. You have. Everyone has. The real question is, how long will you let them define you? Right now, somewhere in your life, someone sees you as the safe one, the one who won't push back, the one they can overlook, disrespect, manipulate without consequence. That image was built, brick by brick, through every one of these humiliations. But here's the quiet truth Machiavelli whispered to those who listened. The same habits that got you ignored can be reversed. You don't need to change who you are. You need to change what you allow. You need to stop flinching when disrespected. You need to speak less when accused. You need to become rare again. You need to abandon the fantasy that goodness is enough. And when you do, everything shifts. Because once they feel that your silence is not permission, but warning, the laughing stops. They stop joking at your expense. They stop interrupting you mid-sentence. They stop asking questions they wouldn't dare ask someone they fear. You don't need to raise your voice. You just need to become the person they stop testing. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince for tyrants. He wrote it for people like you, people with something to protect and everything to lose. He didn't tell you to betray your values. He told you to stop betraying your image. So now you know the 7. And one by one, they've made you predictable, manageable, quietly laughable. Now remove them. Not tomorrow. Not after you're hurt again. Now. And watch what happens. Because when these mistakes disappear, your presence changes. The room adjusts. They speak to you differently. They watch what they say. They wonder what you're thinking. They feel your silence like a pressure in their chest. You stop being the guy they laugh at. You become the one they can't ignore. And that is when respect begins.